1946. The world had just emerged from war. Cinema halls were filling with people searching for hope, and a young man knocked on Hollywood's door. Isser Danilovich, the son of a poor Russian immigrant family. He had just a few dollars in his pocket, but in his eyes burned that dangerous fire. No one could have known then that within 10 years, this man would bring Hollywood to its knees with his power. But the first film, the first time facing the camera, that first moment, everything started right there. When he stepped onto the set of The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, Kirk Douglas was only 30 years old. When filming ended, he had become someone else entirely. So what exactly happened on that set? How did a young actor become the name Hollywood was talking about overnight? And more importantly, what darkness within Kirk did that first performance unleash? If you want to discover the untold stories behind Hollywood's golden age, subscribe to our channel now. When Kirk received the call about The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, he knew this was his moment. Paramount Pictures, a major studio production, real Hollywood. But nothing could have prepared him for what he found when he walked onto that set in July 1946. The film was directed by Louis Milestone, a perfectionist who had won an Oscar for All Quiet on the Western Front. The cast included Barbara Stanwyck, one of Hollywood's most powerful actresses, Van Heflin, and Elizabeth Scott. Kirk was the newcomer, the unknown quantity, the risk that producer Hal Wallace had insisted on taking. Barbara Stanwyck watched the young actor carefully during those first days. She had seen hundreds of newcomers walk on a movie sets, most of them terrified, trying desperately to hide their fear behind false confidence. Kirk was different. Yes, there was fear in his eyes, but there was something else too. A kind of controlled fury, a determination so intense it was almost violent. When they rehearsed their first scene together, Stanwyck felt it, that raw energy radiating from him like heat from a furnace. After the rehearsal, she pulled Louis Milestone aside and said something that would prove prophetic. This kid is either going to be a star or going to burn Hollywood to the ground. The character Kirk played was Walter O'Neill, a weak, gambling-addicted husband trapped in a toxic marriage. On paper, it wasn't a large role, but Kirk understood something fundamental. There are no small roles, only small actors. Every scene was an opportunity. Every moment on camera was a chance to prove himself. He approached the role with an intensity that surprised everyone on set. Between takes, while other actors relaxed and chatted, Kirk stayed in character, pacing back and forth, muttering lines to himself, his face twisted in concentration. The crew started calling him the Method Kid, though he had never studied method acting. This was just Kirk being Kirk, channeling every ounce of his hunger, his anger, his desperate need to succeed into his performance. Then came the scene that would change everything. It was a confrontation between Walter O'Neill and his wife Martha, played by Stanwyck. The script called for Walter to break down, to reveal his weakness and cowardice. Kirk had rehearsed it a dozen times, but when the cameras started rolling, something unexpected happened. As he delivered his lines, as he let himself sink into Walter's pathetic desperation, Kirk felt something crack open inside him. It wasn't acting anymore. He was tapping into something real, something from his own past. The shame of poverty, the humiliation of being powerless, the rage of being looked down upon. All of it came flooding out. Barbara Stanwyck, a consummate professional who had worked with the best actors in Hollywood, was genuinely shocked. The intensity coming from this newcomer was unlike anything she had experienced. Kirk's voice cracked with real emotion. His hands trembled not from acting technique, but from genuine feeling. And his eyes. Those eyes were windows into a deep, dark well of pain and fury. When Milestone called cut, there was a moment of absolute silence on set. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something special, something rare. Kirk Douglas had just announced to Hollywood that he had arrived. But that night, alone in his small apartment, Kirk felt something he didn't expect. Instead of triumph, he felt fear. Not the fear of failure, but the fear of what he had just revealed. On that set, in front of cameras and crew and established stars, he had opened a door to his inner darkness. He had let them see the wounded boy from Amsterdam, New York, the kid who had fought and clawed his way out of poverty, who carried rage like other people carried wallets. Kirk looked at himself in the mirror and made another decision. He would use that darkness, that hunger, that rage. But he would never let it control him. He would be the one in control. Always. As filming continued over the following weeks, Kirk's performance grew more complex, more layered. He began to understand the unique power of film acting. On Broadway, you had to project to make sure the person in the back row could see and hear everything. But on camera, subtlety was power. A flicker of the eyes, a slight tightening of the jaw, a momentary pause before speaking. These tiny moments could convey more than 1,000 words. Kirk studied how the camera saw him, how different angles and lighting changed his appearance, how his natural intensity read on screen. He was learning, absorbing everything like a sponge. Lewis Milestone watched this transformation with fascination. He had directed many actors, but few with Kirk's almost obsessive dedication to understanding craft. During one particularly difficult scene, Milestone pulled Kirk aside and gave him advice that the young actor would never forget. The camera loves truth, Kirk, but truth in film isn't the same as truth in life. Film truth is concentrated, distilled, more intense than reality. Your job is to find that intensity and make it look effortless. Kirk absorbed these words, turned them over in his mind during sleepless nights, and incorporated them into his growing understanding of screen acting. Van Heflin, who played the male lead, had a different relationship with Kirk. There was a wariness there, a recognition that this newcomer represented a new breed of actor. Heflin was professional and supportive, but he could see what everyone on set was beginning to see. Kirk Douglas was not going to be satisfied with supporting roles for long. This young actor had the hunger, the talent, and the ruthless determination to claw his way to the top. And in Hollywood's brutal hierarchy, that meant he would be competition soon enough. When The Strange Love of Martha Ivers premiered in the summer of 1946, Kirk Douglas sat in the dark theater with his heart pounding. This was the moment of truth. He had seen himself on screen during the editing process, but watching it with an audience was different. Every reaction, every silence, every laugh or gasp told him whether his performance worked. And when his first scene appeared on screen, when that face filled the frame with its intense eyes and strong jawline, Kirk heard something he would never forget, a collective intake of breath from the audience. They were reacting to him. They were seeing what he had put on screen. The reviews came quickly, and they were better than Kirk had dared to hope. While Barbara Stanwyck received top billing and critical praise, multiple reviewers singled out the newcomer Kirk Douglas for his intense and memorable performance. Variety wrote that he showed great promise. The Hollywood Reporter noted his powerful screen presence. These weren't just polite acknowledgments. They were predictions, prophecies of what was to come. Hal Wallace, who had bet on Kirk, smiled when he read the reviews. He had been right. This young actor was going to be big. But success brought its own complications. Kirk had tasted something on that set, something intoxicating and dangerous. The power of performance, the control over audiences, the ability to make people feel what he wanted them to feel. It was like a drug. And like any powerful drug, it demanded more. More roles, bigger parts, greater challenges, higher stakes. Kirk Douglas left that first film experience with two things clearly established in his mind. First, he knew he could succeed in Hollywood. He had the talent, the look, the intensity that cameras loved. Second, and perhaps more importantly, he had discovered that the darkness inside him, that rage and hunger that came from years of poverty and struggle, wasn't something to be ashamed of or hidden. It was his greatest weapon. What nobody understood then, what wouldn't become clear for years, was that Kirk's first film experience had set a pattern that would define his entire career. On The Strange Love of Martha Ivers set, he had learned that intensity and control brought results. Being the most focused, the most prepared, the most demanding, it got you noticed, it got you respect, it got you power. But there was a shadow side to this lesson, a darker implication that Kirk either didn't see or chose to ignore. The same qualities that made him a great actor, that fierce determination and uncompromising intensity, could also make him difficult, controlling, and sometimes cruel to those who worked with him. Years later, when Kirk Douglas had become one of Hollywood's biggest stars, when he was producing his own films and wielding enormous power, people would look back at that first performance in The Strange Love of Martha Ivers and see the seeds of everything that followed. The intensity was there from the beginning. The hunger was there. The refusal to accept second place, the drive to dominate every scene, the need to be in control. It all started on that set in 1946. Kirk himself, in his later memoirs, would write about that first film with a mixture of pride and something else, something harder to define. Regret, perhaps, or recognition of a door that once opened could never be closed again. The transformation from Ivers Danielovich to Kirk Douglas wasn't complete after one film, but the foundation had been laid. That young man who walked onto the Paramount lot in July 1946 with fear and determination in equal measure had discovered who he really was, or perhaps who he needed to become to survive in Hollywood. The boy from Amsterdam, New York, who had wrestled and fought his way through poverty, had found a new arena for his battles. And this arena had cameras, lights, and millions of people watching. For someone with Kirk's hunger, with his need to prove himself, to dominate, to win, it was perfect, dangerously perfect. The Strange Love of Martha Ivers wasn't just Kirk Douglas's first film. It was the birth certificate of a legend, the origin story of a man who would define masculine intensity in Hollywood for decades to come. From that first performance, audiences and industry insiders could see what was coming. This wasn't just another handsome actor looking for fame. This was something different, something more dangerous and more compelling. Kirk had brought a raw, almost savage energy to the screen, an intensity that felt both exciting and slightly threatening. The film itself became a noir classic, remembered for its dark themes and powerful performances. But for Kirk Douglas, it represented something more personal and profound. It was the moment when everything he had been, all the pain and struggle and rage of his early life, found a purpose and a channel. Acting wasn't just a job or even an art form for Kirk. It was a way to transform his demons into something valuable, something that could bring him the recognition, respect, and power he had always craved. That first film taught him that his darkness wasn't a weakness. In Hollywood, properly channeled and controlled, it was his greatest strength. In the decades that followed, as Kirk Douglas blazed through Hollywood, leaving an indelible mark on cinema history, people would often ask him about his first film, about that moment when he stepped in front of movie cameras for the first time. His answers varied over the years, but there was always a certain look in his eyes when he talked about The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, a mixture of nostalgia and something darker, more complicated. Because that set was where everything began, where Ivers became Kirk, where the hungry young actor discovered the power of his own intensity, where a door opened that could never be closed again. And on the other side of that door was Hollywood stardom, legendary status, enormous power, and all the complicated, sometimes dark consequences that came with it.